Time for another breakdown, this time of the new Apple short film, aka commercial, called Saving Simon, and it's directed by Jason Reitman and his famous father, Ivan Reitman. If you've seen any of my breakdowns in the past, you know that I'm really focusing more on the tech aspect, not the storytelling. If you haven't seen it, you might want to watch it before you watch this behind the scenes breakdown, as spoilers will happen. But what I want to look at is how they use the iPhone to tell this story. And so yeah, they shot with an iPhone 13 Pro and they did a mix of cinematic mode and traditional shot footage. And that's one angle that I'm going to look at, is how they intermingled that. But the first thing I want to concentrate on is to look at the gear. And by the way, yes, this was an Apple produced short film with A-list filmmakers, the directors in particular. Pretty small crew once you see what they did here though, but still, bigger budget than you or I would probably ever have access to, especially for a short film. However, keep in mind, they are shooting with a phone. And so that means that yes, you could do the same thing on your own. And that's kind of my larger point for all these breakdowns, is to show that really what they're doing is no different than what you or I are doing. They just have a creative director there on set and of course a little bit more money, maybe a lot more money. You could do this for free, truth be told. Especially this one, I really think this one in particular, anyone could do. And so in saying that, let's check out what they used. And the very first thing I want to bring your attention to is this shot right here. This is a behind the scenes video that Apple released. And in his hand right here, let's zoom in, that is an iPhone. It's a little bit blurry. You got some motion blur going there, but that is FiLMiC Pro. And so again, they are shooting with cinematic mode, which is the native camera app, and traditional shot footage. And it looks, to my eye, if you look real closely there, it's hard to tell, it's a little bit blurry, but it looks like that says ProRes. And so I'm pretty sure they shot with a mix of ProRes and then H.265. So I just find that interesting to see that they mixed it up. And that's just a good reminder that, yeah, you can shoot cinematic mode and regular footage in the same project, and it can look good. And by the way, speaking of that, cinematic mode shoots in 1080, 30 frames per second, and that is how I downloaded it from YouTube, and that is 1080. However, interestingly, they converted this to 24p, and that's what I do when I shoot cinematic mode. You can do that and it'll slow down. You can use 30p as a slow-mo shot, or you can do it by doing a conversion, and that's what they did, which again, I find so funny. Why don't they just give us 24p? That's a whole nother topic. But this was shot in 1080. And that's what you're looking at right now. I downloaded it from YouTube. And so there is compression added, but overall it looks pretty good from that respect. So here is a shot of the main crew. And the main crew that you see is really inside the house. There are exterior shots as well, but that looked more like a smaller crew. And I'll get to that in a minute. But I want to point out a couple things here. You've got a guy in the bottom left corner down here and looks like FiLMiC Pro. And he's got false color up. Then you got a guy over here on the right shooting, and I'm pretty sure these are behind the scenes shots, because obviously Jason Reitman is up here in the front and he's right in front of this freezer. And by the way, he shot the movie. There is a DP on this, and let me find him real quick. There he is, James Whitaker. So officially he's the DP, but if you look in the behind the scenes, 99% of the shots are Jason Reitman operating. So I pointed out FiLMiC Pro. Now let's look at the rig he used. It was a very small, compact rig because they did shoot a lot of handheld. Almost the whole movie is handheld. And so here is a little rig they used, and you can see that it's got a B-script. He's using a half B-script Pro. And down here, there is a HDMI adapter, lightning to HDMI, that plugs into a monitor. And on top here, that's what that is. It's a wireless video transmitter. And then other than that, it's a pretty basic setup. He's got some kind of weird tripod, almost looks like a Joby. But for the most part, he doesn't use a tripod. He shoots handheld. Here is a behind the scenes shot. This is the little girl over here on the left side of the frame. This is the freezer she's looking in, and you can see they took the back of the freezer out. And right here is a light lighting her. Almost looks like a Kino flow. It's hard to tell. And then he is inside the back of the freezer, which is a nice trick because you can see you're shooting through the freezer. And I do like those kind of looks. It's kind of like shooting through a mailbox kind of shot. Again, handheld. He's got the video rig on there and he's doing kind of a quasi dolly right there. Real easy to do. Keeping things simple. I like that. Right here, if you look very closely, that appears to be a Moment MagSafe tripod mount. Now, I'm not exactly sure why they're using it like this because they've taped it to the ceiling, but it's kind of cool to see they are using that on the iPhone and mixed in with a bunch of gaff tape and painter's tape. And so that is one awesome thing, obviously, about using phones is you get a high quality camera that you can put pretty much anywhere, kind of like a GoPro, but maybe even better than the GoPro because the phone is flat. And so here is that shot looking straight down above the freezer. Now, we'll go outside for a second here. And if you look closely outside, they're shooting with two cameras. And they do that a lot on these Apple short films, which can definitely speed things up. But if you look real closely here, they have ND filters on this. And I found this to be pretty interesting. I'm glad they're using ND, and I'll talk about that in just a minute when I look at the actual footage, not the behind the scenes footage. But these NDs are little 37mm mount clip-ons, and they don't cover both lenses, which is really weird. And I can't explain why they did that. Because if they're shooting cinematic mode, the way I understand it is cinematic mode uses both lenses, the wide and the tele together, along with LiDAR to make that shot. It's a weird setup considering they make clip-on NDs that cover the whole lens mount, the whole triple mount, the larger camera bump. Here's a closer shot of that. You can see the ND right here, and it's just clipped on and just covering just part of the camera bump. And then right here, again, is probably a Teradek, hard to say. It's a wireless video transmitter. Always have Fernie pads with you. That's what that is. You can use them for sound blankets, or you can use them to get down on your knees and get a shot, or if an actor has to do a small little stunt or a pratfall or something, those are great to have. And I mentioned earlier that inside the crew seemed bigger, and that's my feeling, because when you look out here, the exterior shots here look to be all available light. I don't see any lighting in the shots anywhere, which is what most people do when they shoot outside, especially low budget. However, you saw me break down Snow Brawl. They had all kinds of big HMIs outside lighting up the forest, fog machines, snow machines, etc. Here it's pared down. I don't know if that was a creative choice or a financial choice, but it is interesting to see that they're using available light. Now, overcast like it is can work great, can create a nice soft diffuse light, and that really looks like what they did. But I just wanted to point that out, that again, this could be anybody out here shooting this. It's a very small crew. And of course, the stuff I do, it would be even smaller. I often do short films with 2 or 3 people. So it can be done, guys. It can be done. Now, I want to point this out just as a side note. He is sitting on this set, and it's like a build of the freezer that has these giant pieces in there. I can't figure out if they actually used this in the movie or not, or whether it was just for him to do this behind the scenes interview. Because in the actual movie, I didn't see any shots that were really require that kind of forced perspective or visual effects to make it look like you're in the freezer with it. I could be wrong. Like for instance, here's one of the shots, and that could be using that shot. It is possible that that's that, but that is a cinematic mode shot racking between the two, but it could be that oversized shot. And then they did a bunch of these macro shots. I really like these. You can see this macro shot. Now, see this person here with the eyedropper. They squirted some water on there, and then here's the actual shot. I think that's pretty cool. You can see how easy that is. He's got that camera lined up, and now it's like it's melting. Water's dripping down. Very simple gag, something that any one of us could do, but it's nice seeing it broken down and really demystifying the process. Now, this is something interesting too. If I didn't know better, I'd think that's just a hockey stick there in the hallway with the phone strapped to it. I don't think this shot actually made it into the movie, but this is, again, something I want to stress. This is an Apple-produced short film, and they're using DIY-style methods because they're using a phone. So they just got the phone strapped on that stick, and they're getting a shot of her feet. And that's all it is. Last thing I'll point out on the behind the scenes, and then we'll get to the actual footage. They were pretty brave to do these really low light shots. It looks very cool, and the phone will perform okay in those, but they've got this graphic up here, advanced low light performance. Not really. They do have a new sensor. These shots look good, but you really got to work hard to make these look good. And I'm not sure whether they did a bunch of denoising in post-production or what. But I do applaud them for doing these low light scenes. And I like that shot, by the way. Kind of looks like a Spielberg shot with the flashlights. Reminds me of E.T. or something. All right, now I'm just going to quickly go through the actual movie, and I just really want to show you the way that the behind the scenes stuff ties to this and how they implemented the shots. And really a big thing is how they use cinematic mode, which is a new thing with the 13 series phones, mixed in with traditional footage. So in other words, you don't have to shoot all one or the other, and they did a good job with that here. Now this opening shot here, she's looking out her window. Now the shot of the boy walking here, watch this rack focus to the snowman, right on the Saving Simon title. That looks pretty realistic, I gotta say. That looks good. It's handheld, you can see a little bit of handheld shake, but I like the way that looks. So that sequence of the girl and that shot of him walking was cinematic mode, but then when we cut to this shot, this is not. And it's interesting because I still think it looks good, but watch him knock the snowman over. I'm gonna point out a couple things. See that? That right there is motion blur. And that's what you get when you use an ND filter. And an ND filter is an extremely important thing to make your footage not look like iPhone footage. It's one of the biggest things I recommend. Shoot with an ND filter. Now, she runs out here. Now look at this shot where he kicks it. This, you can tell it's a cinematic mode shot and there's no ND. You can see every little detail of the snow there. It reminds me of the Snow Brawl short that they did with the iPhone 11 Pro. Looks cool and it works, but there's no motion blur, so it's just a different kind of shot. Now I want to show this real quick. This is a technical glitch. See these little glitches? See where everything's out of focus and then that window behind her is in focus? So I'll step back and forth between. Window is in focus, out. I believe that's cinematic mode, trying to figure out what to track. So I'm being really nitpicky here. The technology is brand new and it's pretty good, but it does need some work. Now that does have motion blur on her running though, so that tells me that they were using the ND filter there. Because otherwise, shooting outside, even in an overcast condition with all that bright snow, you would be getting some very staccato looking footage. Now this sequence here is a nice mix of that's cinematic mode, that is not, that's the ultra wide. That looks like it could be wide or ultra wide, but these aren't cinematic mode shots. And for whatever reason, to me, these shots here look like iPhone shots in quotes. They don't look as cinematic to me. And I don't mean even just cinematic mode, I mean just in general. These shots, they feel more like you're shooting on a phone. All right, now we're back in the house. I just want to point out a few things in here. I like the look of this, sort of. I like what they're trying to do, the pools of light. And that is, again, kind of brave to shoot like that with a phone, small sensor. However, I don't love, look at the mom's skin tone. That just looks like clay. And I'm not sure why. Used to do that on the older phones. The newer phones don't really do that. I think it's the color grade. And they went with kind of a crunchy color grade. I can't tell if they're trying to go for a vintage vibe or not. I don't love the grading on this particular short film, in my humble opinion. But again, that can be subjective to a degree. This is a cinematic mode shot. You can see around the dad's head, a little bit of a glow there, but it does have a pretty nice look. But if you look closely, you can see the cutout there. A general audience would probably never notice that though. Now here is the actual shot in the movie where we showed earlier of the freezer, shooting through the freezer. Got a nice parallax move there coming around as she puts that in. And that is a cinematic mode shot because they are out of focus in the background. And then it racks to her, which is pretty nice. Now that's a side angle shot. That could potentially be why they built that big set where Jason Reitman is sitting in the behind the scenes. I'm not 100% sure because that would be kind of hard to get. Although you could tape the phone to the side of the freezer. So that's unknown. Now these shots here, this one in particular is probably one of my favorite shots in the movie. It looks like a shot in a traditional film. It just has a very nice look to it. You got this, a little bit of a bloom, a little bit of a halation, the light coming in the window, very soft. I really like that. And it continues here into the kitchen. This window has a little bit of a bloom. Now, I don't know whether they added that in post. You can do that pretty easily, add halation or glow, or whether that was a filter they used in camera. I don't know, but I do like it. But it also is adding a little bit of weirdness to the shots, especially outside. And I'll show that in just a second. This is one of them. So I can't tell if this is a mistake or if this is done on purpose. If you look closely at this shot, it looks like chromatic aberration, or what it looks like potentially is where I showed those filters earlier and they weren't covering the lens properly. It almost looks like there's a lens put on this camera and it's not fitted properly, or the filter is misaligned. Something's not lined up right. Either that or it was done on purpose Again, maybe adding some sort of vintage look to it, kind of a chromatic aberration or a halation look. And there's another one of those shots I'll go over in just a second. Now, these shots where the refrigerator is opening, I just want to point these out. These look pretty good, and I'm not seeing any dynamic tone mapping issues, because that's an exact shot where you'll have that trouble. Meaning you open something across a frame, whether you're walking across a frame, a door opens, or what have you, and then the phone will auto-expose up even when everything is locked. It does pretty well there. This one does a little bit worse, though. Look here. You can see that actually look inside the freezer. You can see as I'm going back and forth there, the dynamic tone mapping is kicking in. And even though it's locked, you're seeing a shift. And that is one thing that they haven't fixed yet. And we're watching an Apple produced show and they can't even fix it. So hopefully it'll be resolved completely in the future. I like this shot, similar to that previous bedroom shot. Although that's a ultra wide shot, at least it looks like it. Ultra wide I've had trouble with in shadows. I did a video about that. So beware of using the ultra wide in any kind of low light scenes, that's for sure. Here we're back to the night stuff, and I think again they're pretty brave to do this. The freezer is lighting the dad's face primarily, although there is a little bit of a tungsten thing going in the background there from the table. I like this look a lot. Surprised they could pull that off on the iPhone. The little blue light there. If you get in the fridge here, though, look right here on top. That looks like some kind of an aperture LED. You can see the LEDs lined up there. They probably just left it in the shot because, it doesn't really look bad, but it does look like a light panel stuck to the roof of the refrigerator or the freezer, but it works and it's sending out the light that's lighting her and lighting her dad. Now right there, look at that shot of her face. That's that weird double image thing. And again, I downloaded this from YouTube, so there could be some compression going on, but I feel like that is a lens they used, potentially a telephoto, and it wasn't lined up properly on the device. I don't know that for a fact, but something is weird there. Now, these outdoor shots, and I really do think these look pretty cool. I like the look of this, but let me point the same thing out here. Up here in the sky, look at the sky. You've got little aberrations around the highlights. Looks like chromatic aberration, but it also looks like it could be a lens that's misaligned around the edges. Or maybe it's actually a little bit of a focus thing they did in post. Hard to say, kind of a weird look, but it does add character to it, and maybe that's what they were doing. And then when you cut to this angle, this is the only place I really saw that they added much or any kind of fog or smoke. Behind her there, it looks like they were trying to grab the sun rays and they fogged that up with a fog machine. I like that look. Again, reminds me of Snowbrawl, but they didn't do much of that. Now this shot is a traditional shot. When they cut to her right here, that is a cinematic mode shot. So again, right there, it's a nice way to use both in the same scene. Because if you're shooting wide, when you cut in tight, you're going to have shallow depth of field more times than not. On a wide shot, you don't typically. You would have more deep focus. So those kind of things work well, I think. So now we're back to the house. You can see this is cinematic mode and it's really shallow. They're probably shooting like an f2, f2.8 right here. You can see right around the edge of her head, the hair is a little bit soft, kind of a glow there. Doesn't bother me though. I think it works. I probably wouldn't do it quite so shallow. You can adjust that aperture in post, but it is kind of a nice dreamy look. It's like you're being pulled into what she's thinking about the snowman. Now here is that shot again of the kid on the bike. Now if I freeze it here, you can see some great motion blur, so they absolutely use the ND filters here, but it's the same thing with the house. Look around the door, you've got some weird, almost a double image, chromatic aberration, like a lens is lined up wrong. Again, it could be halation they added in post, but it looks like a chair down here. The chair is all smeary and stuff, but it works, adds character to the shot, but it is kind of weird. Now in here, these are the night scenes, interior night shots. These work nicely. It's hard to tell if there's much noise. Doesn't really matter. It looks good. And then in here with the night flashlights, again, this kind of reminds me of an ET kind of shot. Looks good. They did smoke this room up, added some fog to get the nice beams. Those look good. But then you do get the dreaded green dot flares that you get on the wide lens using the iPhone. Works here. Doesn't really bother me that much because the flashlights are doing that too. But that is one thing to look out for. Now this next shot is really interesting, especially for this kind of a film. This is not something I would normally ever do. There is no light in the scene. If you look real closely, you can see the cars down here. You got a little bit of sky in the distance. Otherwise, it's just black. I'm surprised they didn't turn like a porch light on maybe, or maybe a light in one of the rooms, or even just put a little LED light up against the house, like maybe it was a street light. Just something to create some separation, but they didn't do it. I don't love this shot for this kind of movie, but it is kind of brave to do that on a phone. Now, when we cut in here, we tie into that. You got the blue moonlight on her. and then the kitchen wakes up. And I do like that shot. That's pretty cool. Again, shooting on a phone, that can be tricky. Dynamic tone mapping could kick in. And then here they did a little smoke gag. Look at the smoke going across the top. Again, this may have been the larger than life scale production design thing they built, the set they built. But I do like the smoke gag. That wouldn't ever really happen, but the fog coming out looks nice. And then now we're back to the front of the house near the end of the movie. Now look at the house. This is a nice, crisp, clean shot. Think about this compared to the 2 shots I showed previously with the weird chromatic aberration look and the kid riding his bike out front. And I'm not saying it looks bad. It's just an odd choice since they didn't do it here. But this shot looks really good to me. And so they walk out, it's the normal camera, and they cut when she goes close. And now we're in cinematic mode. And we're in cinematic mode there, cinematic mode. And I want to point this out. Again, this is an Apple produced spot, but this visual effect here is kind of silly. It works in real time, but if you walk through it, so the little girl's eyes are open. Cut to the shot here, her eyes are already shut, and she's already reacting before the bike gets there. Again, I'm being picky, I realize, but hey, this is what you do when you're breaking down something in a shot. The bike isn't there yet, and then she's flinching. And then on top of that, look at the bike wheel. It really looks like, to me, it's about 2 feet this side of the snowman, so it wouldn't even hit it. They should have used a longer lens look here. The perspective was off. And then they do a visual effect when they hit the snowman, and while it looks fine, it doesn't look very real. And, you know, it's kind of one of those shots that, again, works, but I'm surprised they didn't try something a little bit better for this type of production. I do like they added motion blur there. Motion blur helps sell it. And then that looks good. I can't tell if that's an animation or what, but nice motion blur. It's blowing apart. And then right here, the snow kicks up on her. And at first I thought that was just someone throwing a shovel full of snow up there. But when I look at it, I think it's a mix of that maybe and digital, or maybe it's all digital. The snow doesn't go over the little girl. Looks like she's keyed out. It's really weird. So I don't know if that was some kind of a composite or it's just a bad digital visual effect where they didn't put it on her, or because she's wearing that yellow coat. Maybe they did that on purpose to make her stand out. Either way, it's kind of weird, but it sort of works, especially in real time. And then this shot here of the boy, again, just showing how they mix and match. This is all cinematic mode, but when they go to this shot of him, they go away from cinematic mode. And so I think it's just because it was such a moving shot. He's there and he tilts down. That's all regular shot footage, maybe on the telephoto lens. And then here they're back in cinematic mode and they've got some snow falling. That I'm almost 99% sure is digital. And then the last shot here of the house, that's a regular shot. And it looks good. I really like it. Again, I just want to stress, they used an iPhone to shoot this. They had a pretty big crew, but it wasn't a huge crew. This is a short film that you could easily make on your own. And truth be told, this is probably not my favorite of the bunch that they've done. I like Snow Brawl a lot better. I even like the vertical cinema stuff better than this one as well. The story here is great. I like the story. The visuals on this one, while they're interesting and pretty good, they're not as inspiring as the other ones. Other than the cinematic mode stuff looks pretty good. But the color grading I didn't love, the lighting I didn't love. So overall, this is my least favorite of the ones I've broken down so far. However, I think it's also the most approachable one, the most doable one for DIY mobile indie filmmakers to pull off. This was basically shot in one location, inside someone's house in their front yard. And that is something that is much more doable, especially on a low budget. And truth be told, just like you saw Jason Reitman there directing and shooting pretty much the whole thing, you could do that too. You don't need a big crew at all. So I hope you learned a little bit and it helps demystify the filmmaking process that really, if you break it down shot by shot and really look at it, it makes it so much more relatable and doable, in my opinion, no matter what your budget is.
If you want to write stories, you pick up a pencil. If you want to write songs, you pick up a guitar. And if you want to make movies now, you can just pick up an iPhone.
Well, thanks for watching, guys. This is Blake Calhoun. Please like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.